Welcome those of you who may have just joined us to today's Adult Education Senior University Understanding Alzheimer's and Dementia class with instructor Debbie Woodroof. Welcome, Debbie.
Thank you all for joining me this afternoon. I want to just start our conversation out with a little bit of why I volunteer for the Alzheimer's Association. In approximately 2010, my mother was diagnosed with Alzheimer's, and she began a journey that in 2014, she went into a facility, and then she actually passed in 2017. In the meantime, in 2014, I actually reached out to the Alzheimer's Association to see if there were resources available to help me help her. And once she was in the facility, I continued with a support group situation that I had found. And then when she passed in 2017, I felt that it was something that I wanted to take on passionately as far as helping others through the journey of Alzheimer's. So I retired in 2021, and at that point, felt that that was something that I could do in my retirement. So that's why I volunteer for the Alzheimer's Association. And I'd just like to take a quick show of hands. It looks like we maybe only have one or two people in the room, but those of you that are on Zoom, if you could also maybe raise your hand just to see how many of you had the unfortunate situation where you've been touched by Alzheimer's or some type of other dementia. And I'm seeing a couple of hands on the Zoom group. So thank you for doing that. It is a widespread impact. And if we go to the next slide, these are some 2023 statistics, but some facts and figures about the Alzheimer's disease at this point in time. More than 6 million Americans are living with Alzheimer's today, and over 11 million Americans provide unpaid care for Alzheimer's or other dementias. And you can see by the amount there on the screen, that equates to over $340 billion being spent on Alzheimer's. So it is one of the costliest conditions in society today. And if left unchecked, it will make a critical impact on our financial situation. What you see on the screen now is some additional statistics. 1 in 3 seniors dies with Alzheimer's or another dementia. It's actually more prevalent than breast cancer and prostate cancer combined. The lifetime risk for Alzheimer's at age 45 is 1 in 5 for women and 1 in 10 for men. And we'll talk a little bit about what's causing that difference in just a minute. Between 2000 and 2019, the deaths from heart disease had decreased 7.3%, while the deaths from Alzheimer's disease have increased 145%. In 2023, Alzheimer's and other dementias, as I mentioned, will cost the nation $345 billion. While only 4 in 10 Americans talk to their doctor right away when experiencing early memory loss and cognitive loss, 7 in 10 would want to know early if they have Alzheimer's disease, if it could allow them for earlier treatment. And I should back up to that statistic around the dollar figure. By 2025, these costs could rise to nearly $1 trillion, which I don't even know how to count that high. So to me, that's just astounding as to how many people that impacts. So the mission of the Alzheimer's Association, we are leading the way to end Alzheimer's and all other dementia. And how we're doing that is by accelerating global research, driving risk reduction and early detection, and maximizing quality care and support. So we're attacking it from all different directions. And we have seen some success over the last year. In fact, in the last 2 years, we are now considering that we have entered the age of treatment. That doesn't mean we're stopping that research, because that by doing that global research, that has allowed us to enter the stage of treatment. So we'll talk about that in just a second. So just to make sure that we're all on the same page with some important definitions, our mission references Alzheimer's and dementia. So let me tell you a little bit about dementia and Alzheimer's. Dementia is the general term for memory loss, thinking, language, problem solving, and other abilities that are severe enough to interfere with daily life. Alzheimer's is the most common cause of dementia. Dementia is not a single disease. It's an overall term, like heart disease, that covers a wide range of specific medical conditions, including Alzheimer's disease. Disorders are grouped under the general term of dementia, and as the slide describes, it's the umbrella term. That general term, those are caused by abnormal brain changes. These changes can trigger a decline in thinking skills, also known as cognitive ability, severe enough to impair daily life and independent function. And they can also cause behavior changes, feelings, and relationships. Alzheimer's disease does account for 60 to 80% of all cases of dementia. Vascular dementia, which is the second one listed on the right-hand side, vascular dementia occurs because of microscopic bleeding and blood vessel blockage in the brain. And it's the second most common cause of dementia, as I mentioned. Those who experience the brain changes of multiple types of dementia simultaneously have what's called mixed dementia. And there are other conditions that can cause symptoms of dementia, including some that are reversible, such as thyroid problems and vitamin deficiencies. A couple of the other dementias that are listed on the right-hand side of your screen, Lewy body dementia has a significant impact with regards to delusions, hallucinations. It's somewhat similar to Parkinson's dementia. Frontotemporal dementia, a lot of times is caused by falls and brain trauma. So that can cause the frontotemporal dementia, but there are numerous types of dementia that do fall under the umbrella. So what is Alzheimer's? It is, as I said, the most common cause of dementia. It's not normal in aging. However, the greatest known risk factor for Alzheimer's is increasing age. And the majority of people with Alzheimer's are 65 years or older. Alzheimer's disease is considered to be younger onset Alzheimer's if it affects persons under 65. Younger onset can also be referred to as early onset dementia or Alzheimer's. And people with younger onset Alzheimer's can be in the early, middle, or late stage of the disease. I'm aware of people that have unfortunately developed Alzheimer's in their mid to early 30s. So it can vary. The age factor can vary widely. Alzheimer's does worsen with time. It is a progressive disease where dementia symptoms gradually worsen over a number of years. In the early stages, memory loss is mild, But with the late stages of Alzheimer's, individuals lose the ability to carry on a conversation and respond to their environment. And unfortunately, with Alzheimer's, the more progressive it is, when you get into the late stage of Alzheimer's, not only will they potentially not recognize their family member, but they also do not recognize themselves. On average, a person with Alzheimer's lives 4 to 8 years after the diagnosis, but in some cases, they can live as long as 20 years. It really depends upon other factors, all of the factors combined. And as I mentioned, often dementia will start out very slowly and gradually get worse. However, sometimes it doesn't follow what the normal timeline would be. The important thing is that if you or someone you know is experiencing memory difficulties or other changes in thinking skills, don't ignore them. Even if the symptoms are mild, it's important to see a doctor and to determine the cause. There are many benefits in receiving early and accurate diagnosis, including an opportunity to plan for the future, access support services, and explore treatment options. The one thing to keep in mind, unfortunately, the last item on this particular slide says the disease is ultimately fatal. You typically will not see that as a reason on the death certificate, though. If you were to look at my mother's death certificate, it actually says failure to thrive, which in other words, she stopped eating and her organs started to shut down. So it's unusually rare to see a doctor actually sign the death certificate with Alzheimer's, but ultimately that is what caused the organs to start shutting down. So in some communities, the risk of Alzheimer's is even greater. And unfortunately, studies do show that Black Americans are twice as likely as white Americans to develop Alzheimer's. And Hispanic Americans are 1.5 times more likely than non-Hispanic white Americans to develop the disease. Members of underserved, diverse communities are more likely to endure poverty and have more limited access to quality health care. They're also less likely to pursue a diagnosis, receive support, or participate in clinical trials. And so Alzheimer's also has a disproportionate impact on women. In the United States, more than 11 million women are either living with Alzheimer's or caring for someone who has it. And almost 2/3 of Americans living with Alzheimer's are women. Women in their 60s are twice as more likely to develop Alzheimer's disease over the rest of their lives as they are to develop breast cancer, which I find that a real surprising statistic. At the Alzheimer's Association, we do believe that diverse perspectives are critical to achieving a health equity, meaning that all communities have a fair and just opportunity for early diagnosis and assess risk reduction and have quality care. The association is committed to engaging those underrepresented and underserved communities and responding with resources and education to address the disproportionate impact of Alzheimer's and dementia. And one of the other reasons we know that Black Americans and Hispanic Americans, they're less likely to seek outside support. They have typically, in a lot of cases, there's multi-generational families living under one roof. And so they don't necessarily feel the need, or they can take care of the issue within their household. So they don't necessarily seek outside support to help with the care of the family member. The impact on Alzheimer's on families, it really impacts the adult children and the spouses of people living with dementia, because they often serve as the primary caregivers. It can really be challenging for all family members to accept the changes in their roles and their responsibilities. It's almost as if you're turning things upside down, and the father, the mother, the spouse has always been the caregiver, and now it's incumbent on the children or the spouse to now be the caregiver of that person. So it's kind of like switching up, and the parents now become the children, so to speak, and the children have to take on the adult roles. So it's a big topsy-turvy situation. The demands of caregiving can limit a caregiver's ability to take care of themselves as well. Family caregivers of people with Alzheimer's and related dementias are at greater risk for anxiety, depression, and poor quality of life than caregivers of people with other conditions. Additionally, the lifetime cost of care for individuals with Alzheimer's is more than twice the amount incurred by individuals without Alzheimer's. And as the slide represents, approximately 2/3 of caregivers are women. More specifically, over 1/3 of dementia caregivers are daughters. 83% of the help provided to older adults in the United States comes from a family member, friends, or unpaid caregivers. And this care is valued at over $271 billion. And what's important to keep in mind is what happens to the person that has Alzheimer's or some other type of dementia when the caregiver gets sick, or that in some unfortunate situations, or if the caregiver passes before the person with dementia passes. So it's really a burden and a hardship for those family caregivers. It can be. And that's why we offer to folks in a lot of our communities caregiver support groups. Those can be lifesavers. I know it was a lifesaver for me. So because Alzheimer's and dementia does have profound effects on individuals, families, and whole communities, it's important for us to be equipped to recognize the warning signs. There are 10 key warning signs and symptoms of Alzheimer's, which can be subtle. It is possible for individuals to experience more than one of these signs in varying degrees, and it's not necessary for individuals to experience every sign in order to raise concern. Just a couple, and I would encourage you to be thinking about it. So I'm going to give you some examples from my mother's perspective. And I'm going to zero in on the failure to plan or solve problems, and the difficulty completing familiar tasks. My mother was always the bookkeeper for my parents and our family. And so she was the keeper of the checkbook, and she paid all of the bills. And every month when the bank statement came, she would balance that checkbook and bank statement down to the penny. And if it didn't balance down to the penny, then she would sit there and figure it out until she had gotten down to that penny. Well, I started noticing that first off, she was having trouble balancing the checkbook, and she was making a lot of penny errors here and there, transposing figures in the check register, and that was causing a lot of the reasons why she couldn't get the checkbook to balance. But also, I noticed that she started paying our bills a little irregularly. And on one occasion, instead of paying the 8-week payment on our newspaper, she decided to write the check for an entire annual subscription amount, which was not within our budget for that particular point in time. So, and when I tried to explain it to her, she could not understand why that's how she's always paid that bill, and it wasn't. So that was one of the key signs for me early on that she may be having some issues. Number 5, trouble understanding visual images and spatial relationships. Early on, up until about 2013, she was still driving. And driving is a big issue when you start talking about signs of Alzheimer's and signs of dementia. But she was still driving, but I noticed that she was starting to have little fender benders. And when I would ask her, when I would come home and she lived with me. So when I asked her why there was a scratch on the front fender, when I knew what the answer was, because her friend who had ridden in the car with her that day told me that she had inadvertently run into something on their way down to go to lunch. She told me that someone must have sideswiped her in a parking lot. And so that's why that damage was on there. She did admit to one day taking out a mailbox, and that's why the passenger side rear view mirror was hanging off of the door when I got home. So she did admit to that one, but she didn't admit to the other one. And so, and also her balance, spatial relationships as far as walking, her balance started to really be an issue to the point where she could not visually recognize the difference between a curb and stepping off of a curb onto another area of pavement. And that caused several falls to the point where we had to go to the emergency room and had to get new glasses and so forth. So those kind of issues, it's not about forgetting where you laid down your car keys. It's forgetting what the car keys do and how to start the car. There is a difference between just forgetfulness and cognitive impairment. And these 10 warning signs are good opportunities to kind of feel what's the difference. Like I said, forgetting where you set your car keys down, probably just a remembering issue. Forgetting how to turn the car on or what the keys do, that's a sign of cognitive impairment. So it's really critical that you pay attention to those signs in memory, thinking, or behavior that you notice in yourself and or someone else. And if you see those changes that are new or unusual, that you do take action by having a conversation with a doctor or a trusted family member or friend. Sometimes, a lot of times, the individual that's experiencing these changes, they do not want to admit there's anything wrong. And my mother was a classic example. She would always say to me when I would point out, "Mom, I think there's a problem." And she would always say, "Why can't you just accept the fact that I'm getting older and I'm forgetful?" Well, it wasn't that she was getting older and forgetful. She was getting older, but the forgetfulness, it was more than just regular forgetfulness. And so we did talk with the doctor, but it's so important that you talk with a doctor at the early stages, that when you're first noticing this, rather than when it's becoming a critical issue. And there, as the slide says, there are a number of benefits to early detection, including the opportunity to plan for the future, getting all of your financial situation in place, starting the conversation of talking with an attorney is critical, and so forth. Exploring treatment options. There are some treatments today that can help to slow down the progression. It's not a cure, but it can help to slow down the progression. And part of those, or some of those treatments involve being included in a clinical trial or a clinical study. But involving the person with dementia in those important discussions about decision-making and future care is critical. So the earlier you can start those discussions, the better. As I mentioned, we are excited. There has been, over the past 2 years, there has been an incredible amount of information. Our research has come out, and our research has helped develop those treatments that are on the market today. The current medications still cannot cure Alzheimer's. That's the bad news. But there are treatments that can change the disease progression. There are also drug and non-drug options that may help treat symptoms such as memory loss and confusion. I mentioned sometimes it's thyroid issues, sometimes it's diabetic issues, sometimes it's merely a vitamin deficiency that could be adding to the memory loss and the confusion. So that's another critical reason why it's important to talk with your doctor. Treatments that are on the market today may be administered via a pill, some in a patch form, or the treatments that have come on the market most recently are intravenously or infusion treatments. And those are the ones that you've heard maybe a lot about in the news recently. But because everyone experiences Alzheimer's differently, these treatments do work in varying degrees, and they're not effective for everyone. There's even a relatively unknown treatment that was recently on a one of the TV shows initially, and then I went out to take a little bit more investigation about it. But it's actually a MRI treatment that helps to eliminate or remove some of the plaques and tangles that form in the brain. So anyway, most importantly, can't emphasize enough, talk to your doctor to learn more about the treatment options. And you can learn more about different treatment options that are available and have been approved by the FDA for going to alz.org/treatments. So what science says about brain healing: there are several risk factors for cognitive decline and dementia, and some, such as age, we can't control, but there are things that we can control to improve our brain health, to help us increase the key healthy habits that may lower the risk of cognitive decline and possible dementia. Overall, keep in mind, what is good for the heart is good for the brain. And it's never too late or too early to start making healthier choices for brain health. I would also encourage you that some of these symptoms or that might look like Alzheimer's, or even might impact Alzheimer's. Also, you want to take a look at the current condition of your eye health. And so it's important that you're getting regular eye doctor visits, and also checking on your hearing. Those things can also impact or can make it look as if the cognitive decline is happening, and it could be exacerbated by either eye problems or hearing problems. So as far as brain health is concerned, challenge your mind. Stay in school or do opportunities like you're doing today, finding out more information. Keep challenging your mind. Get moving. Exercise is we know is good for your heart. It's good for your brain. The more oxygen you're taking in by movement, the better off your entire body is. And so if you can't do walking exercises or exercises at the Y, what about swimming exercises or chair yoga, chair exercises? But the bottom line is keep moving, eat right. We do know that properties of the Mediterranean diet are better for our bodies. They're better for our heart. And again, what's good for the heart is good for the brain. Maintain a healthy weight. And we all know that we all struggle with that one. But the better we are with our weight control, the better we're going to be for our entire body. Control blood pressure, manage diabetes, protect your head. If you are a bicyclist, make sure you're wearing a helmet. If your balance is off, talk with your doctor about how you might be able to improve your balance. Maybe you need to use a cane or some type of assistance to do a lot of walking. Don't be embarrassed by having to use some type of an aid to protect yourself. We do know that head trauma can lead to those small brain bleeds or large brain bleeds. And we know that brain bleeds can lead to cognitive decline. It's important that we get a good night's sleep. Naps are okay as well, but it's important that we get 7 to 8 hours of good sleep every night. It allows the body to regenerate. It allows the brain to regenerate. And we really do encourage folks to be smoke-free. We know that that's not good for your heart. And again, what's not good for your heart is not good for your brain. So making a difference in our community, as you can see from what we've discussed so far, there's many reasons to feel hopeful about our vision for a world without Alzheimer's disease and all other dementia. As the Alzheimer's Association is leading the way to end this disease, we don't stand alone. We're doing this work with the help of people like you nationwide who have joined the fight. We believe that people in our community deserve access to services, programs, and awareness to diagnose and treat dementia, as well as support throughout their journey. And the Alzheimer's Association is that trusted authority and the only organization in communities across the nation that can lead this essential work. We do have people that are working with our congressmen, are on the local level, state and national congressmen and senators. We are in Washington, D.C., focusing on talking with legislators. We're thankful that President Biden has discussed and put through some legislation that has had a definite impact over the last couple of years on the research dollars going towards research, as well as impacting the FDA and the new treatments that have come online. So how we help is, we do have the 24/7 helpline that is manned by, it's free of charge, and it offers confidential support and information to people living with dementia, caregivers, families, and the public. And this was the lifeline for me one evening at midnight when my mother was having a significant issue and I didn't know who to turn to at that time of night. So I was sitting at my computer and I typed in Google, Alzheimer's help. And up popped the 1-800 number. I picked up the phone and called the number and was helped through the immediate crisis. But also I was asked if I would like to receive a packet of information. And a couple of days later, here came the packet. And included in there was a list of locations for support groups in my area. And I jumped on that and here I am today. But anyway, the helpline is staffed by clinical experts who can help you through, guide you through whatever your situation is. And then they can continue to help you throughout the journey. It is free of charge, 24/7, 365. I highly encourage the use of the helpline. We also have free education, such as what you're listening to today, and support available through our website, which is alz.org. And there is a myriad of information available out on the website. We also, in our communities, none of this happens without, none of the research happens, none of the website activities. We're supported by a group of volunteers, but it does come down to raising funds to help fuel the mission. So two of our biggest activities that we have throughout the year is we have the Walk to End Alzheimer's, which happens in the month of October. October is Alzheimer's Awareness Month. And so that is when you can get active by walking, organizing a team of walkers, and making contributions to support our activities. And then there's the longest day, which occurs on June the 21st, which is the summer solstice, which is the longest day of light in the year. And so we also have an emphasis on Alzheimer's, supporting the Alzheimer's Association at that point in time as well. But that doesn't mean that you can't contribute and support the Alzheimer's Association at other times throughout the year. You can do it as your birthday pledge that you want to organize a group, and this is done a lot of times on Facebook, where instead of giving me a gift, you can give me a gift through your pledge to the Alzheimer's Association. So there's lots of ways that you can contribute. But in addition to your dollars, this is also how you can help. As an individual, you can share your personal story as an advocate. You can help your neighbors by providing education or a support group. You can get involved in clinical trials or a research study, and you can sign up for one of the fundraising programs. As an organization, you can start a team to walk to end Alzheimer's. You can host an educational program like today, or a community listening session. And you can share your resources with your business associations, your neighbors and friends. That's the best way to get our word out. For your community or for your neighbors, you can share that there is that 24/7 helpline and the number. You can get more information and resources at alz.org. And you can find, this is a really cool resource that was just developed in conjunction with the Alzheimer's Association and AARP. So if you were to go out to alz.org/community resource finder, it's all one word, and you will be asked to put in your zip code, and up will pop all of the resources. I think it's within maybe a 20-mile radius of that zip code. So you can find out doctors, you can find out attorneys, you can find out nursing facilities, you can find support groups that are active. So this website is just so fabulous. And like I said, it was recently developed. So we're constantly adding and updating to that website. So I'm going to kind of wrap up our conversation today, that I'm reminded by the words of our founding president, Jerome Stone. Mr. Stone was a true visionary in the Alzheimer's movement. And when his wife, Evelyn, was diagnosed with the disease in 1970, information about Alzheimer's at that point, even amongst the medical community, was really limited. But he had a drive and a determination, and he took the disease that was cloaked in silence and helped create this global conversation that we're having today. So today I invite you to become a part of that volunteer community. It's so essential to reaching and impacting our country, as in the communities that need us the most. So Mr. Stone said, do things here and now, not after you're gone. If you have some money, share it. If you have some time, do something with it. And what we hope to have is a world without Alzheimer's and all other dementias, because of your actions and all of the other volunteers across the United States. So that really ends my presentation for the day. I'm going to stop my sharing. And Tatiana, I'll turn the microphone over back to you.
Yeah, thank you, Debbie, for teaching us about understanding Alzheimer's and dementia. I do have a question. So the question is, I recently read about a blood test that diagnoses dementia probability. Do you have any information on this test?
I don't know. That's a great question, and thank you for that. I don't know specifically about the details. Ironically, or maybe, I have an appointment, a regular checkup appointment tomorrow with my primary care physician. And so I am going to be asking them about that blood test. What I do know is it's a blood test that is designed to, similar to how when, if you've ever unfortunately been affected by cancer, they can do a blood test to see whether or not your family history is a predictor about if you would be more likely to develop cancer or additional cancers in your lifetime. So it's kind of like that blood test, but this specifically diagnoses or gives you the probability of whether or not you may be more susceptible to coming down with Alzheimer's disease. I'm interested because, as I've mentioned, my mother had Alzheimer's. Her youngest sister just recently last year passed away also with Alzheimer's, so my aunt. And I do know that on my mother's side, in addition to that generation, there was also a great aunt of mine that also, back in that time, they didn't call it Alzheimer's, they didn't call it dementia, they called it hardening of the arteries. And in all likelihood, based on what I know about her situation, she probably did have some form of dementia. So that's 3 generations on my mother's side that could indicate that I would be more likely to develop dementia at a certain point. I am over 65, so you know, I do fall into that category of being in the age bracket that would be more likely for dementia, and I have the familial, hard to say, history. So I personally want to know whether or not I would be more likely to develop dementia. Some folks don't want to know. And you know, that's a kind of a catch-22, and it's a personal decision. But if you are interested, I do believe you can go out to the Alzheimer's website, alz.org, and there should be additional information out there with regards to the blood test and what's available at this point. And then I would encourage you, if you do have an interest, I don't know what the cost is. I don't know if insurance covers it at this point, but I would encourage you to talk with your doctor. Great question.
All right, thank you. We do have some compliments to you and the excellent presentation that you gave in the
Thank
chat.
you.